I begin by learning that, despite his terrible weapon, a likely token of brigandage and gluttony, the Languedocian scorpion is an extremely frugal eater. When I visit him at home among the pebbles of the adjacent hills, I carefully ransack his haunts in the hope of coming upon the remains of an ogre's feast, and I come upon nothing more than the crumbs of a hermit's collation. In fact, as a rule, I find nothing at all. A few green wing cases belonging to some tree bug, wings of the adult antlion, dismembered segments of a puny locust. These make up my list. The hamlet in the paddock, assiduously consulted, tells me more. After the fashion of a valetudinarian who lives on a diet and eats at stated hours, the scorpion has his feeding season. For 6 or 7 months, from October till April, he does not leave his dwelling, though always fit and ready to wield his tail. During this period, if I put any sort of food within his reach, he sweeps it out of the burrow with the back of his tail and pays it no further attention. It is at the end of March that the first cravings of the stomach are aroused. At this season, on inspecting the cabins, I sometimes find one or other of my specimens quietly gnawing at a capture, a meager myriapod, such as a cryptops or lithobios. For that matter, the frequency of the item is far from making up for its smallness, and it is long before the consumer of the scanty morsel finds himself in possession of a second. I expected something better. Quote, a brute like that, unquote. I said to myself, so well armed for battle cannot be content with trifles. We do not load our pea shooters with a charge of dynamite to bring down a sparrow. That awful sting was never meant to stab a humble little animal. The scorpion's food must be some powerful quarry. I was wrong. Terribly equipped for fighting though he be, the scorpion is an indifferent hunter. He is a poltroon. He is a poltroon into the bargain. A little mantis, come into being that same day and encountered on the road, fills him with dismay. A cabbage butterfly puts him to flight merely by beating the ground with her clipped wings. The harmless cripple overawes his cowardice. It needs the stimulus of hunger to persuade him to attack. What I am to give him when his appetite begins to awaken? What am I to give him when his appetite begins to awaken in April? Like the spiders, he requires a live prey. Seasoned with blood that is not yet congealed, he requires a morsel quivering in the throes of death. He never eats a corpse. The game, moreover, must be tender and of small size, thinking to give him a treat. In the early days of my experience as a rearer of scorpions, I offered him locusts, picking out the biggest. He obstinately refused them. They were too tough and, besides, too difficult to handle owing to their kicks, which demoralized the coward. I tried the field cricket. With a belly as plump and luscious as a pat of butter, I drop half a dozen into the glazed enclosure with a leaf of lettuce, which will console them for the horrors of the lion's den. The singers seem not to heed their terrible neighbors. They sing their little songs and nibble at their salad. If a strolling scorpion appears upon the scene, they look at him. They point their slender antenna in his direction without any other sign of perturbation at the approach of the passing monster. He, on his side, draws back as soon as he sees them. He is afraid of getting into trouble with these strangers. Should he touch one of them with the tip of his pincers, forthwith he flees, overcome with terror. The 6 crickets spend a month with the wild beast, and none takes note of them. They are too big, too fat. My 6 patients are restored to freedom as safe and sound as when they entered the cage. I serve up wood lice, glomeres, millipedes, luli, ayuli, all the rabble of the rocks beloved of the scorpion. I make a trial with acidae, worm-like millipedes, and opatra, which assiduous lurkers under the stones in the actual places frequented by the hunters. Might well be the customary game. I offer clythra beetles, the glowworm. I offer clythra beetles, gathered on the brushwood beside the burrows, and Cicindelea, tiger beetles, captured on the sand in my guest's very domain. Nothing, absolutely nothing is accepted, apparently because of the ungrateful exterior. Where shall I find that modest mouthful, at once tender and savory? Chance, provide me with it! Chance, provide me with it! In May, I am visited by a beetle with soft wing cases, Omophilus leptroidus, a finger's breadth long. He arrived suddenly in the enclosure in swarms, around an ilex all yellow with catkins. There is a whirling cloud of beetles flying, settling, sipping sweets, and frantically attending to their love affairs. This life of revelry lasts a fortnight, then they all disappear in caravans going one knows not whither. On vans going. On behalf of my boarders, we will levy on these nomads who look to me as though they would be suitable. I was right in my assumption. After a very long wait, I see the scorpion make a meal. Here he comes, stealthily advancing towards the insect motionless on the ground. He does not hunt his quarry, he gathers it in. There is neither hurry nor contest, no movement of the tail, no use of the poisoned weapon. The scorpion placidly grabs the morsel with his 2-fingered hands. The pincers bend back, carry it to the mouth, and then both hold it until it is all consumed. The insect that is being eaten, full of life, struggles between the mandibles to the resentment of the eater who likes to nibble quietly. Then the dart bends down before the mouth, very gently. It pricks the insect once or twice and paralyzes it. The mastication is resumed and the sting continues to tap, as though the consumer were swallowing the morsel a forkful at a time. At last the insect, patiently chewed and chewed again for hours on end, has become a dry pellet, which the stomach would refuse, but this residue has entered the gullet so far that the sated scorpion cannot always reject it directly. The intervention of the pincers is required to extricate it. One of them seizes the pill with the fingertips, daintily extracts it from the throat, and drops it to the ground. The meal is finished. It will not be repeated for a long time to come. A great improvement on the wire gauze covers. The large glazed cage, full of animation in the evening twilight, provides me with abundant information touching this strange frugality. In April and May, essentially the season of festive assemblies and banquets, I provision the place lavishly with game. At this time, my lilac walk abounds with cabbage butterflies and swallowtails caught in the net, their wings partly amputated. A dozen of these butterflies are let loose in the establishment, whence their main condition will prevent them from escaping. In the evening, at about 8 o'clock, the wild beasts leave their lairs. They stop for a moment on the threshold of their potsherds to inquire into the state of things. Then, gathering from more or less all directions, they begin to stroll to and fro with their tails now uplifted, now trailing behind them, with the tip always curling upwards. The mood of the moment and the objects encountered determine the posture. The discreet light of a lantern hung outside the panes allows me to watch events. The mutilated butterflies whirl in short flights over the ground. Through this desperately fluttering mob, the scorpions pass to and fro. To and fro, knocking them over and trampling on them without taking further notice of them. Sometimes, in the hazards of this scrimmage, one of the cripples settles on the ogre's back. He does not mind these familiarities. He makes no protest and carries his unaccustomed rider up and down. Some of the heedless creatures fling themselves under the stroller's pincers. Others actually touch the horrible mouth. It makes no difference. The scorpions disdain their food. A similar experiment is repeated nightly so long as Pierre's abounds on the lilac bushes. My catering leads to very little. From time to time, however, I witness a capture. A butterfly fluttering on the ground is grabbed by one of the promenaders. The scorpion quickly snaps her up without a pause and goes his way with his pincers still groping and held before him like a pair of distraught arms. This time the hands do not keep the morsel within reach of the mouth, being otherwise occupied in reconnoitering the path followed. It is the mandibles only that carry the booty. The butterfly, eaten alive, desperately flaps what is left of her wings. She produces the impression of a white plume, waving on the crest of the savage victor. If the captive's struggles become excessively inconvenient, the spoiler, still walking along and munching, quiets her with little pats of his sting. At last he flings the prize away. What has he eaten? Just a head, no more. Less often, others hasten to convey the booty to their lairs beneath the potsherds. Here the meal will be taken far from the madding crowd. Others, after securing their capture, withdraw to a corner of the enclosure and refresh themselves in the open, with their belly on the sand. A week later, after a certain number of these incidents, I inspect the place and examine the caves one by one to ascertain the amount of provisions consumed. The wings, those uneatable leavings, will enlighten me in this respect. Well, save for rare exceptions, there are no wings detached from the corpses. Nearly all the butterflies are intact. They have dried up without being eaten. A few of them, 3 or 4, have been decapitated. The results of my conscientious investigations are limited to this. During a week in the full swing of activity, a tiny mouthful has been enough for these head eaters. There are 25 of them in my establishment, 25 sated with a crumb. To them, the butterfly must be an almost unknown fare. It is doubtful whether, down in the rocky labyrinths, they ever capture such game, which loves tall blossoms and sinuous flights. Unfamiliar with this quarry, they may disdain it, merely taking a bite in the absence of food more to their taste. Now, what can they find in their wild, sun-parched territory? Locusts, apparently crickets, a horde that is never lacking wherever there is a blade of grass to nibble. It is on these that I rely my preference when the season of the pierres and other ordinary butterflies closes. The paddock then abounds in crickets and locusts, a very youthful generation, clad only in a short jacket. These are surely the proper diet for my scorpions, with their love of tender mouthfuls. Some are green, others gray, some fat, others thin, some are mounted on stilts, others are squat and short-shanked. The consumers can make their choice amid the varied assortment. At nightfall, in the area faintly lighted by the lantern, I distribute my crop of locusts, who are fairly quiet at this late hour. The scorpions lose no time in making their appearance. The living mana is wriggling all about them. At the least tap, the nearest strollers decamp. They find things too exciting. It is an exact repetition of the experiments with the butterflies. None sets any store by the None sets any store by the titbits. The titbits, most certainly seen and even touched. for the scorpions often encounter them and walk on them. I see a locust who, as luck will have it, has got caught in the fingers of a passing scorpion, and the latter is too good-natured even to close his pincers. Ever so gentle a squeeze would put him in possession of an excellent head of game, and heedlessly he allows it to slip away. I see a little green locust hoisted by accident on the back of a promenader, a terrible mount that carries her quietly without dreaming of harming her. 100 times I witness face-to-face meetings, defensive retreats, wishes of the tail that sweep aside the heedless creature encountered on the highway, but never any serious hand-to-hand fighting. Still less pursuit. It is only at rare intervals that my daily observations show me one or other of my frugal eaters in possession of a locust. At pairing time in April and May, a sudden change of behavior turns the sober scorpion into a glutton and makes her indulge in scandalous orgies. At this season, I often come upon a scorpion in the enclosure under her tile, devouring one of her own kind in perfect quietude, as she might devour an ordinary head of game. Everything goes down except as a rule the tail, which remains hanging for whole days from the sated creature's jaws, and is finally rejected as though with regret. It may be presumed that the poison file at the end of the joint has something to do with this refusal. Perhaps the toxic fluid has a flavor which is unpleasant to the consumer's taste. Apart from this remnant, the devoured scorpion disappears entirely into a belly whose capacity seems inferior in bulk to the things swallowed. It takes a very obliging stomach to find room for such a dish. Before being chewed and packed away, the contents must be larger than the container. Now, these gargantuan banquets are not normal reflections, but matrimonial rites, to which we shall have occasion to return. They take place only in the mating season, and the animals devoured are always males. I shall not therefore enter these scorpions who die victims of their embraces on the list of normal victuals. What we see here is the aberrations of an animal at rotting time, wedding orgies worthy of figuring besides the tragic nuptials of the praying mantis. Nor shall I enter the feast provoked by my artifices when I confront the scorpion with a powerful adversary, and worry the two combatants in my eagerness to see the duel. Thus exasperated, the scorpion defends himself and stabs. Then, in the intoxication of his victory, he eats the fallen foe, insofar as his swallowing faculties permit. This is his manner of celebrating his triumph. Never, but for my intervention, would he have dared to attack such an enemy. Never would he have bitten into such a bulky prey. Apart from these banquets, which are too exceptional to be taken into account, I note none but frugal collations. My vigilance is perhaps at fault. It might well be that the consumption is greater at late hours of the night in the absence of witnesses, and therefore, before granting the scorpion a certificate for extreme moderation in diet, I appeal to the following experiment, which will give us a definite reply. Early in autumn, 4 medium-sized specimens are installed separately, each in a saucer finished with a layer of fine sand and a potsherd. A pane of glass closes the receptacle, prevents the escape of the skillful climbers, and allows the sun to enliven the dwelling. Without keeping out the air, the lid is enough to prevent any small game such as close moths or mosquitoes from entering the enclosed space. The 4 saucers are deposited in a conservatory where a tropical temperature holds sway for the greater part of the day. No provisions are served by me, nor will the least mouthful ever arrive from the outside, unless it be some vagrom ant. In this total absence of provisions, what will become of the interned scorpions? Always brisk and lively without a scrap of food, they go to earth under the potsherd. They rummage about and dig themselves a burrow closed by a barrier of sand. From time to time, especially in the evening twilight, they issue from their lair, take a short stroll, and then go home again, behaving just as though they had been fed. When the cold sets in, though it is not freezing in the greenhouse, the prisoners no longer leave their home. which has been dug a little deeper in anticipation of the severe weather. Their health, for that matter, it continues excellent. When I inspect them, as my curiosity often prompts me to do, I find them always fit and ready to repair the burrow with which I have disturbed. Winter ends without mishap. There is nothing unusual in this. The cold season, while suspending activity, moderates or even does away with the need for refection. But the heat returns, and with it, the need of food, which calls for provisions. Now what do these fasters do? While their kinsmen... But the heat returns, and with it, the need of food, which calls for provisions. Page 44. Now, what do the fasters do while their kinsmen in the glass cage are restoring their strength? With butterflies and locusts, are they languid and anemic? Not at all. Quite as vigorous as those who have been feeding, they brandish their gnarled tails and reply to my teasing with threatening gestures. If I worry them too much, they run away quickly along the circumference of the saucer. Famine does not seem to have tried them. This cannot go on indefinitely. About the middle of June, 3 of the captives die. The 4th holds out till July. It has taken 9 months of absolute abstinence to put an end to their activity. Another test is arranged for very young specimens, about a couple of months old. They measure about 1 inch in length from the forehead to the tip of the tail. Their coloring is brighter than that of the adults. The pincers in particular look as though they were carved out of amber and coral. The future horror has his attractive points in early youth. I find them under the stones from October onwards, invariably solitary like their elders. They dig themselves under the chosen shelter, a little hole barricaded by a sandy mound consisting of the rubbish of the excavations. When taken from their retreat, they run along nimbly, curving their tails over their backs and brandishing their fragile stings.